Welcome back. This is part 2 of the episode with Dr. Gianfranco Conti.
And another thing that I may want to, that I noticed, unfortunately, a very common issue is that still there is a lot of misunderstanding about sentence builders. A lot of people, I remember Helen Myers, who is I'm sure, a very capable leader of the what they call ALL organization. She's done a lot for language learning, etc., but doesn't really have a deep understanding of instructed second language acquisition. And she said, "Oh, I've seen all those activities before. I don't really see what's new about EPI." And that's the problem with a lot of people who don't delve into or try to understand the approach. They think that it's the same sentence builders that one used to have in the 80s, and they see the sentence builder as a knowledge organizer. Basically, they don't understand that you do loads of listening activities with it, that you do loads of different phonics-based activities with it, lots of fun interactive activities with it. They basically see them as you remember old school writing mats?
Yeah.
And it's funny because then people who read my blog and do not, have the books, when they come to my workshop, they actually say, "Oh, that's what you do with the sentence builder."
Yeah.
And I wonder,
they're not just a writing frame, they're not just yeah.
So if you look at EPI, you think a lot of the activities people know already. I mean, bingo, right? Spot the intruder, yeah, or things like even things like Poltieko to a degree. Somebody might have done it before, or things like likely or unlikely, or things like spot the missing detail, or even spot the difference, right? But what they don't understand, because they don't know EPI, is that it is not just a random sequence of activities.
Exactly. It's not a standalone. Yeah, it's fitted in, isn't it? It's fitted into the sequence, and it makes sense.
There was one lady I remember. She's lovely. I won't say the name, but she's teaching in Cambridgeshire, and I remember somebody saying, "Oh, what's new about the sentence builders? I don't understand what." And then she said, "Dude, it's not about the sentence builder. The sentence builder is just a tool. It's about the process of doing all the inputs, how to work with the input, focusing on the micro skills of listening, reading, etc." And even Rachel Hooks, who's a doctor in applied linguistics, mocked basically sentence dealer because she said, "Oh, it's just a motivational activity," without understanding that it's targeting a specific micro skill, which is being able to read aloud and to be fluent in the production of sounds in a framework that goes from chunking aloud to spontaneous speaking. So it's about focusing on on a specific micro skill at the time, so that you gradually scaffold it so beautifully that even the low ability student can join in the conversation with the more able students at the end of it. And that's sad, because the MFL scene is sadly ruled, quote unquote, by people that are not necessarily empathetic with students who are less able, and whose knowledge of instructional second language acquisition is quite sketchy.
Yeah. No, I get that. Interesting. So, I did want to, obviously, we've gone into some very in-depth things there. I did want to sort of talk about also like teachers. We go through serious ups and downs, some turbulent times, and joyous victories at times. But what in your extensive career where you've done so much, what would you say is the moment you noticed you went, this is all worth it. This is why I've done it.
I've had a lot of ups and downs, man. I tell you, first of all, I came from Italy to England, and everyone took for granted that I would know the system. I don't know if you have experiences like that with your French or Spanish colleagues coming to England. It's a culture shock. In Italy, teachers don't do duty. In Italy, we don't have GCSE. You have just basically a very simple 13 plus examination and then an 18 plus examination. You don't have form time. And of course, kids were, and I say were because now they become like that, they were not as, how can I say, in a diplomatic way, disrespectful of adults. Yeah. You would not expect the lack of discipline that I found in some state school where I worked at in Italy. In Italy, it wouldn't be like that. Now things have changed. I think in Italy now it is as difficult for a teacher to keep the class focused as it is in England. And it's obvious because England was at least 20 years ahead of Italy in many ways. Right. And of course, I have ADHD. And although ADHD is a form of quote unquote disability, we talk a lot, we're quite outspoken, we hyperactive, we may say the wrong thing at the wrong time,
Nice.
It wasn't easy for me also from a point of view sometimes of relationship with my colleagues. I'd be very candid about that, not that I want to blame it only on ADHD, but it was a little barrier. So I've had my ups and downs. I've always worked very hard. And I told you that I did think of quitting teaching, just like you told me you did, right? At some point.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I was, before I came to your workshop, funny enough, I was like, is this the right thing? I was kind of feeling a bit lost, but yeah, so we go through those moments, don't we?
Yeah, and I can tell you one thing. You said that the reason why you felt, like you wanted to carry on was because of my CPD. But actually, I tell you one thing that I didn't tell you when we had this conversation before in the Pizza Express.
I know, I was focused on the pizza.
I tell you something. You know why I wanted to go back into teaching? For the same reason, except that my CPD lasted 1 year. On my MA TEFL, so I did 2 years in a school in Bedford. It was a very difficult, comprehensive school, very difficult, like really difficult. And I had this very committed, very hardworking head of department who couldn't handle my untidiness. She kept saying, you need to put that tape recorder away. This is tape recorders days, yeah. They might steal it because it was a very difficult area. It was a very, underprivileged area. It was just like I had my tires slashed twice in a year. And I remember the kids were really, really poor. We had 2 cases of homicides. Parents of our students were slain, just to give an example. And I remember this head of department one day actually, it was a horrible thing to do, but she said the tape recorder had been stolen. And it was my fault because I hadn't put it away. Just to give an example of the kind of environment I was working in. I even had a department my fault because I was untidy, but I thought that was a bit of a cheap shot, trying to blame me for something that didn't even happen because she was trying to teach me a lesson. So I remember saying, you know what, the kids are hard. I got my good results for GCSE, so I've done my bit. I want to become a TEFL teacher again. Right? So again, because I've done it before. So I decided to go on an MA TEFL. And I feel what happened to me is the same thing that happened to you. A greater understanding of instructor second language acquisition. the idea that you have a pathway to success because you learn research, you understand what happens in the brain, you learn about how to teach culture, how to teach listening, writing, how to teach grammar. I felt, you know what? Now I know.
Yeah.
Or at least I feel I know. And you might have got a glimpse of that on a smaller scale because it was only one session of CPD you did.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's that sense of empowerment and feeling that you have found a framework, a pathway to success.
It's just very, very clear, very like the sequencing, it is empowering, and it did give me that, it inspired me to want to learn more about and it actually improved my teaching. I know it was quite early on in my teaching career, but it did drive me to go, I want to know more about this. This makes sense to me.
That's right. And the second thing that really, really was good when I was in my lowest, is to actually find that that zone with your students where you actually experience a sense of belonging. That you're like, these students are actually not my enemies, they are my family.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to leave a school and start afresh in a new one because of now you're compromised that relationship. It's time to leave. And when you become the father and the mother or the older brother of the students, rather than the antagonist, the people that tells them off, I know that it's hard, but when you teach difficult children, that's what you have to do.
Absolutely.
So when I hear the motivated, the motivated classroom podcast, which I gladly did an episode, which has been very popular from what I see on Spotify, I chuckle because I think about this guy who's a lovely guy, Liam Printer, very good at his podcast and everything, but I wonder what he would do with the techniques that he talks about, that he uses in this posh school where people spend 100,000 euros a year, what he would be able to do in a school in East Manchester where the kids just are extremely deprived and no interest for language learning. They are very poor. They can hardly speak English, some of them, because there's a lot of immigrants from Italy, Romania, Poland who just literally arrived and have no idea of what's happening around them. We need to also understand that at the end of the day, with these kids, it's more about technique. It's even less about EPI than making sure that you establish a special relationship with your kids. And if
I'm a massive advocate for that. Yeah.
And if that doesn't happen, I know you're good at that because I've seen you around kids, but if that doesn't happen, if you cannot break through the barriers that the life histories are often put up with these kids, that school is simply not for you. You might want to teach an international school, go to Dubai, go to Malaysia, go to Thailand, but you cannot teach in an inner city area state school.
You know what, the thing I love about teaching in, state school, I feel like the impact you have on those students is massive. You become a more important figure in their life. You contribute more than just the language to them.
Exactly.
You're an important person to them. You can guide them. You can give them advice. And I think you maybe are slightly more important to them.
Exactly.
And that's what I really like.
You know what you said about being a nurturer in EPI? That's why EPI suits also.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say especially, I'd say also. People say especially, not also, because you can do that EPI at any level. I know that there are schools in Hong Kong which are super academic and they use EPI. The school in Malaysia where my co-author teaches, where we teach the Sultan's children, the Prime Minister children, and they fly super high with EPI. But with these kids, this idea of making it interactive or making less intellectual, it's key because, one thing I notice about working in very challenging schools with really poor kids, that they excel in drama.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
love drama. They all love drama.
Creative subjects, that's so important as well. Yeah.
So if they can imitate people,
Yeah.
and why can they not imitate a language speaker?
Yeah.
As long
Ultimately,
as
yeah.
yeah.
You know what? Early on, when I was younger, that's actually what I loved doing. I would imitate people. I'd put on different accents. I would try and copy, famous people's voices and stuff like that. And that's actually where, my imitation of others, and with tennis as well, that's kind of what I tried to do. I tried to copy certain players and things like that. So I think that is actually something that was really beneficial to me. Imitating people has actually helped my language skills, ultimately.
A lot of kids need from that kind of nurturer figure that
Yeah.
you're talking about. A
Yeah.
teacher who actually makes it clear, whether it is explicitly or implicitly, that you can succeed even without making language learning an intellectual endeavor.
Yeah.
The mother and the father with the kid, all they do is nurturing. They don't, when they're 5 or 6 or 7, you might have the odd corrections here and there. You might have the little capsule of language awareness. Usually the father does that, with the kid. But most of the time is purely usage, isn't it? It's purely usage.
Absolutely.
And imitation and fun.
Yeah.
And when I said to you earlier, you can't have the cake and eat it.
Mm.
Textbook may work with a specific cohort of people. The intellectual stuff may work with a specific cohort of people. But when you are working with kids who are demotivated, challenged, not particularly talented linguists, with poor literacy level, not necessarily a highly developed IQ, you can't have the cake and eat it and say, okay, I want a work-life balance. So I'm just going to get the textbook, active, or the typical off-the-shelf. I was in a school that I will mention recently. I said, why are you using then self material? Because it's off the shelf, and I'm not very good at teaching Spanish. Right? Mm. So it won't work, but it's off the shelf. And it's almost like a receipt. That some people are almost resigned to the fact that kids are not going to learn anyway, right? So if I use the textbook or I use the other thing, it's their fault. Actually, it's not their fault.
Or it kind of looks like I'm doing it. It looks like I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, just one more question. I know we've been chatting for a while, which is amazing, but I don't want to overdo it,
We can do a second part, Ben. I'm always available for you. No problem.
No, just something I like talking to teachers about in the classroom. Obviously, with children's curiosity sparking insane questions sometimes, and fascinating and memorable things happen. What would you say is the funniest thing you've experienced in your language teaching career in the classroom?
The funniest thing, it was, I'll never forget. And it's good because, I don't know if it's a politically correct thing to mention, but I won't mention the countries. So, international schools are interesting because in the same school, you might have 69 different nationalities, right? Sure. 69. And kids, of course, they hear the things they repeat the things they hear in the family. Right. So I was in a primary school, and I used to teach primary for something like 16 years. Imagine, primary all the way to A levels. That's what happens sometimes in international schools. I was one of those teachers. I had the privilege to teach kids from the age of basically 7 all the way to 18. And sometimes they would stay the course until 18. So imagine that. They're like kids, they're like my own children now. And so this child comes in, right? A new child. And I introduce the child. right? And I say, oh, guys, this lovely girl is going to join us. Come on, let's welcome her with a big round of applause. And I hope everyone is going to support her. You know, she's coming in the second term, so she's going to need your help. I would like to have her near her. Oh, I will be a buddy. Okay, good. And then this little kid, we're talking about 7-year-old kid, right? Talking about saying weird things, comes to me and goes, sir, yes, those are the enemy of my people.
Oh my gosh. Oh no.
No, but it was good. It was good. You know why good? Because it taught me a very important thing, that even in the super highly privileged environments, where people travel, and you presume that in international school people are open-minded, they do come from prejudices.
Yeah.
And so I set myself a challenge. I want to demolish the stereotypes. I want this kid by the end of term to talk to this girl without any problems, and understand that whatever her ancestors did wrong, it doesn't reflect on her.
Absolutely.
And I did all I could, group work, games, where I made, and I made sure that the culture I was teaching in the classroom was not about the Eiffel Tower and the map of Paris, because those things, they are important. Don't get me wrong. Maybe everyone wants to know about, maybe want to see a picture of that. But the most important thing is the lifelong learning skills of making sure that those barriers don't exist.
Absolutely. Teachable moment, and you turn it around, right? Those moments are actually golden.
I'm yet to see a textbook, Ben, in England, where actually these skills are embedded in the curriculum. Like, for instance, demolishing stereotypes about the French and the Spaniards. How about adapting to culture shock? So important. What if somebody says something to me that is very unpleasant? You know, Spanish, Italian people can be very direct, whereas English people wouldn't, and you might get offended. You know, an Italian say, make me those photocopies, come on. The person in the photocopying room in England would be upset. Well, please, I remember one of the first experience. I mean, my mom's English. My English is near perfect. Unfortunately, my mom is half Italian too, so she spoke to me in both languages. I still have an Italian accent. Well, you know, I'm proud of it. But I remember using the expression, "Oh, she said that," and then this woman looked at me and said, "Who's she? The cat's mother?"
Oh, yeah.
And I remember me and the other 2 language assistants looking at each other, and this woman with this kind of negative expression on her face saying to me, "Who's she? The cat's mother." And I thought, really, a language teacher, instead of scolding me, somebody with such an experience of language teaching, she'd been teaching for 25 years, she was my mentor, surely she could have approached it in a different kind of way.
Well,
understanding that maybe I made a mistake because I don't speak English as well as she does, because I'm not completely native. Maybe you could have said, Gianfranco, when you talk to people, you shouldn't instead of embarrassing me in front of like 12 people to give an example in the staff room. So imagine these little skills, if even a language teacher doesn't have them, surely kids need to be taught. So imagine if books, instead of dwelling so much on these landmarks, told them, you know, how to be accepting of differences through role plays, sketches. What is developing self-awareness as of, you know, contrasting and comparing, finding similarities. Very often textbooks and teachers dwell on the differences between cultures, right? Which is a phenomenon called othering, which is negative. Instead of looking at the similarities,
finding common ground.
How many people really eat escargot in France? How many people have breakfast with croissant in France? How many people actually go to a corrida in Spain? So, you know, sometimes, you know, it would be so much more fun for the students, much more interesting for them to do that. And if I could tweak the Sentence Builder books in any way, would be actually by incorporating these micro skills, which are so important.
Absolutely, because I've spoken a bit before about obviously being from Essex. I have a particular accent and the way I pronounce certain words and things like that. So I've, you know, in the past there's a bit of a stigma and a bit of a, you shouldn't speak like that. You should pronounce certain things a certain way. And we kind of very much as teachers, you do try and help kids pronounce things in a proper way. But at the same time, it's kind of being proud of where you're from, isn't it? It's being proud of what your background. And I really, really want to embed that. I think that's so important. I'm starting a cultural diversity community really soon here. And I really want that sense of I'm proud to be where I'm from and I want to share that. And it's not just about accepting. I think cultural acceptance is a thing that's, thrown around. I think it's actually embracing of other cultures, not just accepting. So
yeah, I mean, one thing that you learn I remember at university, I had to read the portrait of the artist as young man by James Joyce, right? An obscure book, really. Yeah. I mean, seriously, the guy is very dark person, very intelligent, but very dark. And I remember that at the end of the book, there's this beautiful paragraph where basically he says in a very poetic image that he's going to forge in the furnace of his soul the conscience of his race by leaving Ireland. And I go like, what? Then I reread it. I'm going to forge the consciousness of my race. What? And it took me going to England, living in England, to actually understand what it meant. That in the furnace of his soul, he was forging his consciousness of his race because he was constantly surrounded by people who thought and acted differently, right? So, in other words, by studying a different culture, you understand your own, you understand the other, of course, but by understanding the other, you see actually who you really are, because other people around you with their culture define you, right, in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think that would be that's one of the benefits of language learning if done properly.
Yeah.
That the teachers don't capitalize enough of, but which are life changing. I know that when you pretend to be English, it's because you understand what you're not, what the English are like. When you pretend to be Spanish or French, it's because you understand who you are and who you are not, and you put that on. And that is very enriching. And in the 21st century, is absolutely massively important. And funny, because I was trying to be as English as I could before. Now I'm actually 50-50. And that's the message I'm giving to my daughter. You don't have to force yourself to be fully Italian. You're half Iranian. And as long as you know how to use it in a flexible way when it suits you, right? And unfortunately, because of the pressure of the exam, because of the pressure to cover the 3 pillars of progression and all that, we forget that actually culture can be embedded in the 4 language skills.
Absolutely.
Once you look at them, not as landmarks or projects only. Those are important. Don't get me wrong. You need those too. But when you actually start thinking about, okay, what are the micro skills that you need to function in for instance, would somebody does something to you that you don't like, count to 10, adapt. If you can't avoid, adapt. Okay, let's imagine this happens to you in Spain when you eat. Okay, how can you adapt? Somebody asks you in Spain on a train to eat the food they have. You're supposed to say no, right? But you're supposed to say no without offending either, because you want to show that you appreciate the food, but also you're expected to say no. So how would you do it? What face would you pull? What kind of phrase in Spanish could you use from the ones that I taught you? Or if I haven't taught you, what could I teach you? And, okay, let's look at this text. What does it say to you about what people, do when they go, when they meet somebody that they normally wouldn't do in your culture, and your culture will be very rude, right? I wish I'd been taught that before coming to Malaysia, for instance. I made so many mistakes when meeting people because, of course, you don't shake hands with women. You don't talk, you don't dress in a certain way in certain contexts where in England you would, and many other things like that. And I think the skills can be easily woven into the curriculum. I talk about that in my curriculum.
And they're important. Really important. Okay, so Gianfranco, it's been such a pleasure. And thank you so much for your time today. You're obviously an absolute legend of the language world, so keep doing what you're doing. I love it. So yeah, thank you very much, Gianfranco.
Thank you, Ben. You're a man on a mission, I know, and I like it. I can see the fire. I can feel the fire under your belly. You know, where you really want to enhance MFL, to give these kids a chance. I love your passion for culture, so I hope you carry on doing what you do, because you're younger than me and you've got many more years ahead.
Only a little bit younger.
Thank you very much, Gianfranco, and thanks for listening. See you next time on Language Sofa.